Okay, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. If you'd like to go ahead and drop in the chat where you are joining us from. I am calling in from California. Stephen is in Salt Lake City, and Mario is joining us from Germany. So go ahead and drop where you're joining us from, and we are glad that you could join us today. Just a few housekeeping bits. This session will be recorded, so if you have to leave early or get up, we'll send out the recording later. And if you have questions today, drop them in the top right-hand corner of your menu where it says Q&A, and we will address those as we go or at the end. So I just want to welcome our two speakers today. We have Stephen Sorensen, who oversees the product management of integrations here at Smartling. And Stephen has spent 12 years working in the translation technology industry, consulting and supporting large enterprises and that seek their integrated translation solutions. So he's here to help better serve the needs of their global businesses. And we are also joined by Mario Lenz, the CPO at Hygraph. And Mario is a seasoned product leader. After his graduation in computer science, he spent the first 10 years of his career on the CTO track. And so, but due to his love of solving customer problems, he changed over to product management more than a decade ago. And Mario specializes in B2B scale-ups, where he builds and grows product organizations. And currently, as I mentioned, he is at Hygraph. So thank you both so much for joining us today.
Yeah, very happy to be here. Thank you, Kelsey.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Cool. And just a quick overview for those who are a little unfamiliar. Smartling is an AI-powered language translation software that serves and helps deliver multilingual content across all digital channels. And Hygraph is the federated content management system for the era of composable architecture. So the headless CMS allows you to distribute content from anywhere to everywhere. So that's a little bit about us. And I am Kelsey Woodworth, the marketing manager at Smartling. So today we are going to talk about, crafting connections and kind of how you can unlock the potential with automated content production. And I first want to talk about the importance of personalization and global reach. With the majority of the global population being online, it is so important to tailor this content, whether it's personalizing it in a number of ways, but also translating and localizing this content to reach your global audience. So, Stephen, I'm going to kick it over to you to start us off as we dig into this importance. And I know you have a question for those who are watching.
Yeah, I think we always like to kick it off with a good question, and these webinars, it gets it interactive. I think, from my perspective, the first question I really like to hear is, what are the biggest challenges you're having with localization when it comes to translating your web content or your email marketing content, whatever it may be? We're really interested in understanding what are the biggest challenges you have with localization and translation.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
And you can share that in our, chat and drop in just a nugget there, and we can always review those with you guys, and we can kind of share those with everybody else. I think from here, Mario, you were going to take us through maybe a little bit of your viewpoint on personalization and global reach, and share maybe a little bit about the landscape from the Hygraph perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Pleasure to. I mean, basically, when we take a look at the landscape of content, I mean, obviously, we know that due to personalization demand, due to the need to target specific segments, customer audiences, all of that, the entire the amount of content, the volume of content is just massively increasing. I mean, we all know that. I would even not compare any numbers, say 2022 to 2023 or whatsoever, because I mean, we all heard about generative AI, and of course that has been a big shift. So that's why I would even say in terms of just the sheer volume, it feels like a little bit of comparing apples to oranges. But I think we can see the growing demand for that when we take a look at, for example, a report that has been recently published by the Content Marketing Institute when they were investigating about budgets and benchmarks and trends for 2024. And according to that, nearly half, I think it was 45% of organizations were planning to increase their content marketing budget. And that in the current, macroeconomy where we are, everybody focusing on profitability, and even just read the news and read the LinkedIn messages about layoffs and all of that. I think that tells a lot that, again, nearly half of the organizations actually want to increase and believe in that this is needed to make their business more profitable when they invest more into content marketing. So I think that alone tells us a lot about this need for it's absolutely needed for implementing the global reach. Maybe that's
yeah, so that's a great point. I think we're seeing on our side too a pretty enormous growth from the content perspective. Organizations are creating content much quicker, much faster using generative AI and other elements. Better processes that they're implementing for, better processes, but better technology as well to increase the scalability that they can provide from creating content, reaching additional, users in different markets. And globalization is a big part of that, right? There's no better way to extend your reach by, other than translating and duplicating your website into more and more languages so you can reach more and more users. And that's really important. With this, increase in this growth in content, you have to have really established processes in place to make sure that content, especially if it's not human generated content, let's say we're using a lot of AI to generate content with human review or this or that, there needs to be processes in place to ensure that you're still getting the personalization and the investment that you're making in the initial, website launch for one market. You put a lot of effort into style guides and, making sure things are said the way that they should be said for that market. And it's easy to lose track of that when you're translating, right? When you're growing so fast, you're just replicating the site, you're trying to get it out. You don't have as many experts in those global markets. And so it's important that you have processes in place to be able to capture what you was successful in the original market and then be able to replicate that again in the new market. And there's studies done by CSA research that tell us that users are more likely to buy something from a website if they can read the comments, they can read the reviews, they can read the site all in their native language. It makes them more comfortable to buy, makes them feel more at home, and they're more likely to convert into a sale. So I think that's all really important when it comes to having, not just something in front of them, but something specific that has powerful message to them, really captures them and gets them and brings them in and makes them comfortable to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and as a marketer myself, I can definitely say that when it comes to this content production, you have to kind of keep producing in order to keep up, to not get washed out with all of the noise that is the digital landscape. And so, Mario, maybe you can take us into kind of more of the specifics of how to automate this content creation, because processes are great. It allows us to easily replicate, but what exactly does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely happy to. And actually, everything that Stephen just said, I mean, I think he didn't mention the word automation, but I mean, it was calling for that. Yeah, because how can you, if you're not automating, how can you achieve that level of scale and global reach and translation and localizing all the content? So maybe if it helps, if I just taking the Hygraph perspective here. I could just take a very specific example. Yeah. So imagine you're a company that produces a large volume, a large variety of digital content. So think of, I don't know, you're a streaming company, you're distributing digital assets, videos, stuff like that, or you're in a digital gaming company. And of course, you're operating on an international scale. So what you want to ensure is that regardless of where you distribute your content from and to all the different markets, to the different apps, to the different games, maybe, I don't know, TikTok channels and what so on, you still want to make sure that you have a consistent brand. Your brand remains the same, your messaging remains the same. And of course, you need automation. You need tools for that, because just the sheer volume will not allow you to do that in a manual way. I mean, it's just not feasible anymore. And this is something where, for example, a system like Hygraph shines. So it basically, of course, it's a CMS. Yeah, okay, take that for granted. But specifically, there are 3 specific elements to it. So it's a headless CMS, meaning basically, to translate it the other way around, it's API. Everything is API first, which is exactly what you need for automation. Because if I'm a developer at a customer, say at that digital content, digital video, digital gaming company, then I want these kind of integrations to implement, and I need APIs for that. So everything is API first, everything is optimized for automation. Secondly, we have this what we call composability. It's a term also very well known in the commerce side of this of the commerce applications, so that it basically allows you to build small nuggets and bite-sized pieces of content which you can then repurpose and reshare and reuse all over the place, but basically create once and use again and again and again. And secondly, and maybe that is something that is specific for Hygraph, we are offering a very advanced content federation. So with the idea in mind, but you don't even need to have locally all the information, all the content that you want to distribute, but it could come also from other sources, from other systems. Could be company internally, could be external systems. Maybe it's your marketing department or your legal team. Maybe that's even a better example. Your legal team who insists on, hey, the terms and conditions, these are totally under our control and you must not change them. So it's still, you want to use them, but you basically just incorporate them and send them out and make them part of your brand messaging. So for that specific example of that brand, you want to ensure a unified brand. You would create this kind of projects and distribute the content, create once and reuse it all over the place. And then, of course, you would still need to do something about the content when you want to send it to different geographies, to different markets. And this is exactly where, for example, Smartling comes very neatly in, where it comes in very handy, so that you can really even automate the localization process. So by way of combining Hygraph, API first, and Smartling automation, you can actually secure that you have a unified brand that even speaks the local language. That's how I would describe it. So that is how tools like that are supporting the automation. And maybe Steven, you can say a little bit more about how specifically Smartling comes into that play.
Yeah, so I think our clients are investing in mature products like Hygraph to basically build a mature website, right? Something that can be reusable, scalable, all of the wonderful things Mario just alluded to that are really important in order for you to deliver a good experience on your site with your customers, to be flexible so you can have the same message, from an app into the website, into, different pieces of software that you're putting out that all talk about the same thing in the same way, right? So we've seen it a whole bunch of times where, a company is just very, kind of spoke oriented, and teams work independently from each other. They have different content creators, they have different processes in place. And what this, oftentimes this can cause a very drift in the message, drift in the brand, drift in really what's happening from one product to the next product, or one experience to the next experience. So focusing on, driving consolidation into one platform allows you to, one, have visibility into all of the teams that are working together. They're all on the same mission. They all use similar style guides. They use similar processes to generate content, and it's all reusable, right? They don't have to go in there and recreate the invention all over again. So using that and investing in software like that to help you, you also need a globalization strategy that helps you not lose that when you go into translation. Many times you'll invest in these really mature processes and software, and then you'll think about translation as an after effect. And once you go into translation, you'll learn that when you start sending this stuff off, you need to have a partner that can keep those elements that you've invested in your initial software. You need to have to be able to carry those through. So you need a scalable product. You need to be able to preserve the messaging. You need to be able to preserve the brand. You need to be able to say the same things in the same way every time, not just in the English or the source language, but in all of the markets that you're intending to reach. And this is really what's going to ultimately give you the most return back from using something like that. So at Smartling, we are very API oriented. We work with various different platforms, and we've seen it done a million different ways. And so we've developed a solution that's really flexible, and it can be basically automated from end to end if a customer desires. There are customers work very differently and they have different requirements. And we oftentimes, they don't want to automate everything, even though we can. There's costs associated to that. There's various elements that are associated to that. Maybe they're not ready to push out a release as fast as we can get it. But the technology that we've developed and the processes we've developed have really enabled our organizations to move as fast as they would like. So we have different options for translation workflows. We have, AI-oriented things that can help facilitate higher quality and grade quality, and a lot of interesting things around that. We can get into that more later. But you can trust that when you're working with Smartling, we're going to be able to preserve all of the investment you've made in the original site. We're going to be able to help you recreate and preserve that experience as you launch into new markets as well.
I'm just going to jump in, Stephen. With that, Andrew asked a question in the chat. Speaking of ROI, is there an average increase in conversion rates for a localized language? So I think if I'm understanding this correctly, is there kind of what is the standard conversion rate we can expect to see on localized websites?
I don't have those numbers off the top of my head. I think we'd have to probably do research to pull that. I think we did pull a statistic that from CSA research that indicated that 76% of the people are more likely to buy if it's in their native language. I don't know what the actual conversion rate, pre-translation and post-translation. We could probably pull some of those numbers and do some research on the market to see if anybody's done that sort of research on that. So we'd have to get back to you on that probably.
Okay, thanks.
And maybe just a remark, because we started this entire conversation with the idea of personalization in mind, and of course, to me, automation, or say personalization, requires automation. Yeah, when you think about personalization, I mean, not only you want all that content to be highly personalized, but also in order to personalize it, you need to be very, very, how should I say, data driven. Yeah, so you need to have the very exact information about that particular user, their preferences, their behavior, their demographics, all of that. And obviously, just on that scale, particularly when we talk about global scale, there's no way you can achieve that without a super, super, super high degree of automation. So that will eventually then lead to larger engagement, and maybe even higher conversion rates. And yeah, coming back to the chat question we had, I also don't have any data and numbers here, but at least it's kind of obvious that without automation, you will fail. Put it that way, yeah. Maybe if we just flip it around.
And so kind of as we transition into the next section, we're going to dig into APIs a little bit more. Mari, I know you, Hygraph and Smartling as well, are both really focused on APIs. So can you kick us off on talking about the importance of those and how they work behind the scenes?
Yeah, so I mean, APIs are very important for for developers why? Because they want to integrate. They basically want to build an integrated system, and they want to basically implement their business processes as to their needs. And for that, we definitely could cite, for example, a study by Clio, which the 2023 supply chain executive report. And here, nearly half of the senior executives they interviewed said that they are making very, very proactive investments into integration technology. And not only did they say so, but they also said that only by doing that allowed them to gain an additional at least $1 million in revenue, additional revenue. So basically that kind of integration technology, or implementing this kind of integration, or providing this kind of integration capabilities, allowed them to do additional revenue, because as a company they were just becoming more agile. They could respond to markets needs, to business needs in a faster fashion, all of that. So that's why obviously integration is super important. Yeah, and for integration you need APIs. So it's kind of this kind of logical chain that I see here. So in other words, as we see it at Hygraph, I would say we see it as a kind of also when you take a look at our website, you will see that picture very, very soon. but it's kind of, I would call it, Hygraph with our content management system. We sit in the middle of something that is kind of multi-source, multi-channel world. So meaning that on the one hand, we live in a multi-source world. So, content creation, we had touched upon that earlier. Content creation involves more and more and more highly specialized tools. There are dedicated tools for image generation, for video, for all kinds of content. So because you want a top-notch creative process, so you need the best-in-class tools for that. But on the other hand, you also have all these different channels. Yeah. So again, I mean, Stephen talked about the web app, and maybe you have digital apps. Maybe you have an app on your smartphone. You have something maybe, I don't know, maybe on your smart TV or on social media channels. All of that. So it's this kind of content coming from multiple sources, and you want to send it to multiple channels. And of course, for that, you need this kind of API framework sitting in between, so that so that developers can actually build that integration. And I'm thinking of it like a kind of like a flow. When you think of a river, all the water is getting and collecting into the river, and when it's going into the open ocean, it's basically flowing out again. So it's kind of the same analogy that I would see here, and that is what we see actually at Hygraph a lot. Even customers being very, very much API first, acting in a very much API first manner. So meaning, yes, of course, they also need the user interface and use the user interface, but oftentimes only for trying out. But to actually implement the real live project, they can then go API first.
Yeah.
So that's what we see.
I like that analogy of the river for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very much like that. You have different streams and rivers and orients of water coming together in a pool,
yep.
having, making something happen there. And then again, it distributes back out, right? Yep. Reaching new ground, discovering new things and forging past that it hasn't seen before. So I think that's very, very descriptive of how integration works, right? You're trying to bring in multiple channels, multiple sources, all to kind of accomplish the same goal and really raise the bar for your company. And integration is such a key aspect of that. APIs are, the nuts and bolts of how you integrate, right? You have to be able to have the APIs, which are, just basically the communication path between systems, right? Allows them to standardize on a format of how they're going to send data back and forth to each other, what the expectations are when they get it, how do they authenticate it. All of this stuff is an agreed upon contract that basically allows the systems to communicate together. From our experience, we've worked with dozens and dozens of different platforms that have a different API approach, and they have different API sets. And what we find to be the most beneficial is when they've really given their API requirements a lot of thought. And sometimes organizations will think that a simple API to be able to export out content and put content back in. That's 90% of what they need, and they think this is going to allow us to now be able to integrate, work with other systems, get translation done, and all that's good. And you can solve some of your problems with some simple APIs, and you can do stuff. But what we have found with more mature organizations is they've really given a lot of thought to adding in various APIs to do things such as filter the content, search the content, paginate the content, right? So as a translation organization, it's our goal to reach into the other systems, understand what the content looks like, what the structure of it looks like, what content is translatable, which content is not translatable, and then know how to pull that in a way that we can organize it and make sense for a user to be able to know what they're working with, right? And to initiate translation processes, to check on status of translation, to see if there's been updates made to the original content, right? There's all of these different little things that happen in the translation and content creation process that are important, that are oftentimes overlooked. So we find a lot of value in working with organizations that have given a really good rundown of their APIs and have created APIs into things, that really facilitate a more mature integration with other products. I like the multi-channel, description Mario gave, because that's very much the world we live in. When we bring on a customer, maybe they're working with Hygraph or some CMS product that they're initially going to start translating their website. But really what always comes once they find success in that and they get comfortable, they immediately want to start routing in other channels of content. And all that content, much of that content may live in their CMS, but they're also working, doing email marketing, right? They're sending out email messages from some other platform that's really nothing to do with their website, but it has the same content, right? The users they need to have a process to be able to bring that content over to the other system, even though it's different platform, different users using it. You want to say the same things and when you're reaching out in an email as you're saying on your website. The same goes for a knowledge-based platform, right? So if you have a knowledge-based platform where you're putting out self-help articles and you are answering questions there and giving, nuggets of information, you want that information to be said and descriptive of the way it's said on the website, the way it's said in the email marketing. So you really have this, full 360, degree feel and look and feel on your website that's the same. And so we oftentimes are working with clients from multiple angles where we're delivering a full, from experience to experience. They want translation to work the same. They want the voice to be the same. They want the consistency in the brand. And so we have technology in place on our side, and we integrate with other pieces of technology too to really, to make sure that this is as mature as it can be. We have glossary and terminology integrations. We have AI integrations that allow us to do really, really cool stuff. Like I mentioned before, we do quality evaluation automatically. We can, take a string, we can send it out to 5 different machine translation engines. We can get it back and we can grade the quality of it and rank the quality of it and pick the best choice for you based off of which language. So we also have automatic insertion of, glossary terms. So if you have terminology and brand, catchphrases or marketing terms that you want to have said every single time the same way in every language, we have all of that built into, a terminology or like a glossary. And we have AI integrations that will take that terminology and use the AI to incorporate that automatically into your content without having to have a user go in and read the machine translation and then insert the terminology, kind of correct stuff. A lot of that is now possible through AI integrations. And so we're constantly on the look for new integrations that are going to service our customers better. We do research in the market for various things to make sure we're always thinking ahead and how we can solve problems before they become problems, and really just being a thought leader in the integration space from the translation perspective.
Great. Thanks, Stephen. I want to jump in. We had a question come in that kind of ties into what you just mentioned about the glossaries and brand guidelines and things. But this question gets a little more specific of we're a large global consumer brand and we have needs to translate specifically at country and locale levels. How can we trust that automated translations will allow us to provide control over the nuances in each language?
Yeah, so we have different workflows, right? So you essentially have the ability to send in content. You have a base content, your source content. You need to have each kind of region that you're localizing and may have different specifics. And we have technology that, one, allow you to separate those into different workflows. So you can apply different requirements to each language. Oftentimes, that's kind of translation. So maybe, German and Japanese tend to be a really particular language sets that require a lot of rigor and high quality, whereas other languages, maybe it's machine translation can process those a little bit easier and there's maybe not as much human interview. All languages are a little bit different when you're looking at this, and so being able to apply specific recipes to each language is important, and our platform enables you to be able to do that. Additionally, we have technology in place to say, well, what if we want to get a translation done for one language, but then we really need to change the images, we need to change the structure, we need to rewrite the content for German, rather than using the translation. We use it as a base, but then we really modify and create it into something new. Our integrations are set up, for these other platforms to be able to, one, get the initial translation done, take it, lock it, and then be able to essentially change it however way you want. And then that way allows you to kind of separate each region and each language into its own, really its own content at that point. And you can decide to keep it up and to date with the English, the original English, but you can also keep it separate and lock it down so there's no changes. It's not going through the change management and trying to keep it up to date. You have a message there that you want to keep there. So there's a lot of flexibility in the way we approach that.
Great, thank you. And Mario, for you, there's a question did you want to add something?
I was just, curious why Stephen repeatedly mentioned German being a so difficult language. I mean, but I hear you. I totally get it. It's a weird language. I know. I mean, for me, it's easy, but yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. You said there is another question?
There's a question from Andrew in the chat, and I think the main question here is when you're kind of moving content from a digital asset management tool and feeding it through an API, does this affect page load speed?
So the question is, with content stored on a digital asset manager being fed into Hygraph via API, what aspect would Smartling communicate with? How would this affect page load speed? So this is a great question. We do have an integration with Hygraph today, and we've built that for a high-profile gaming client. And there are other customers we're talking to right now that are very interested, and we've seen a lot of success with that. So if the digital asset management software is really just being fed into Hygraph, well, that data doesn't live in Hygraph, right? It doesn't live there. It's being fed in kind of API. None of the data gets stored in Hygraph. So our integration with Hygraph wouldn't necessarily allow you to translate that content. So we also integrate with digital asset management systems as well. So the integration would be set up to integrate with the DAM, translate send the content from the DAM, get it translated, deliver it back into the DAM, and now you have localized content. Well, that localized content can also be fed in, at will, depending on the language of the site. It will be pulled in, the right content will be served up the proper way into, via the Hygraph site. Now, Mario, you may have a couple of comments on, how it affects the load speed, but I don't foresee it would be really different if you're pulling in English or you're pulling in French. I don't foresee that would be different.
And even, absolutely, you're totally right. And specifically, when I said earlier about, and I used that example even for assets, about the federation and pulling it from another site and not keeping it inside Hygraph because there's another system that actually owns and that manages and distributes that content. Of course, that does not mean that there are not technical things in place like a caching system, for example. So it's more I would separate here more the logical view from which system owns and manages that data versus there is still some technical layer that ensures performance, the page load speed, all of that. So I would distribute that. So I would separate these two aspects, and that's why the page load shouldn't be affected.
Right.
Basically
that's my thoughts as well.
More the technical versus logical view at the data flow.
Yeah, and I think maybe the question was maybe Andrew was thinking that the translation happens on the fly, right? The digital asset, content is coming in, being fed in, but then Smartling needs to be able to grab that content on the fly as it's coming in, translate it, kind of put it back as quickly as possible. And in that way, that would affect the load speed, right? Because then you're trying to translate everything during the process of them going to the page, loading the page, sending it out, getting it back, and that can extend the time. Well, if you have translations done ahead of time in the digital asset manager, you don't have to go through the translation process, right? You don't have to make calls out to Smartling to do that as the page is loading. It's just going to pull in the translated content from the DAM and then present it to the user without needing to make additional calls in that process.
Great, thank you. Okay, and we have another question for you, Mario, about kind of what's coming up for Hygraph. So beyond translations, what other AI capabilities does Hygraph have on the roadmap?
So specifically AI. Okay. So beyond the Smartling integration and beyond what Smartling offers here, we are working. It's not yet quite ready for prime time, unfortunately. But we are working also together with partners on certain AI capabilities. So one aspect is, say, on a very high level, and sorry, as a product manager, I love to express this in kind of stories. We want to make it simpler to actually create the typical schema that you need for a headless CMS. So why not in a conversational interface? I mean, just imagine you could talk to ChatGPT and by going back and forth and have a little bit of discussion, quote unquote, with ChatGPT, you can actually generate a schema for your specific type of application. We see there is a huge demand for that because many developers, they basically want to speed up, they want to increase performance, they want to increase productivity. And why do I need to, even when it's in a user interface, nice and easy and, very convenient, but still it's just way more efficient if I could do that in a, for example, conversational way. And then I see a proposal, then I say, oh, but I need another field here and make this field required, this typical conversation, and then you generate the schema. The other end, so that's more for the developer point of view, schema side of view. So when you actually start building your system, the other aspect that we are also seeing is really for the content creation. That is probably also very similar or related to the question that was actually asked here to Steven. So regarding, if I'm a global consumer brand, I want to be in full control. So how much do I trust the Gen AI tool? How much does it interfere with my brand and my style and the wording I use and my messaging and all of that? But still, there is a lot of need. I mean, obviously, with Gen AI around, a lot of need around these tools, so that I, as a content editor, can more quickly, more rapidly, just faster, in a more productive way, generate the content that I want to bring live. I mean, just imagine maybe to pick another example, not to speak of that gaming or video example again, maybe you're a travel site. Okay, I need a description of Christmas is coming up. What is so beautiful about spending Christmas on whatever Greek island or whatever, maybe in the Caribbean, whatever. So, and then of course you could, utilize tools like that to start shaping some message and start shaping the content, and then maybe you just refine it, but still you're ramping up productivity essentially. So that's what we are working on, as I said, also together with partners here. I cannot commit to a date yet, to be very honest, because we also have, of course, very, very high demands on the quality level here, and so we really want to make sure it really works at a sufficient level.
Great, thank you.
Those sound really interesting. I like those.
Yeah, I can think of a few things to highlight why you should go to a Greek island. That doesn't seem hard, but great. Well, thank you so much. I think we don't have any more questions at this moment, so I think we're good to wrap it up, but you can always reach out to us at hi@smartling.com if you have any other questions that come to mind. I dropped a link in the chat so you can learn more about how the Smartling and Hygraph integration currently works. And if you are available tomorrow, we are having the last episode for the year of our reality series. We'll be discussing the ethics of AI. So I dropped the link to register in the chat as well. And if you can't make it then, we will see you next year at another event. And thank you again to Steven and Mario so much for joining, and for everybody who joined us this afternoon or morning as well.
Thank you, Kelsey. Thank you, Mario.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much. Okay, bye everyone.
See you. Bye.